Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar organized by Funds for NGOs. Today's topic is crowdfunding for NGOs resilience. I am Anutma and I'm excited to guide you through this session. Thank you all for making time to participate. This webinar will run for 60 minutes, which includes 45 minutes of presentation, followed by a 15 minutes of Q&A session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A option on your webinar screen to post your questions, and we will respond to them during the Q&A session. Thank you once again for joining us. Let's dive into webinar. First, webinar's objective: to equip participants with a clear understanding of the concept and mechanism types of crowdfunding, to examine the benefits of non-traditional fundings on diversified income streams and their impact on financial resilience, to help participants gain knowledge on designing and implementing effective funding campaigns, including understanding donors' funding criteria, to create a platform for NGOs to navigate crowdfunding and alternative funding strategies for sustainability. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and recording will be made available in the video section of the Funds for NGOs premium website. And now allow me to introduce today's trainer, Dr. Christopher A. Johnson. Dr. Christopher is an award-winning journalist, editor, publisher, and business management consultant since the 1980s. He is also a former Commonwealth Nuffield Cambridge Press Fellow, Management Science Fellow, a certified Commonwealth Youth Worker, holder of an MBA in Marketing Management, and a doctorate in Business Management. He is renowned for his tutorials in bid writing, business planning, leadership, marketing, and organizational development, capacity building. He is both founding director of Global Entrepreneurial Development Services Limited and chair of Community Education Academy of Leadership. He supports economic and social policy initiatives in Africa, the Caribbean, the Middle East, and South Asia. Now, I kindly request Dr. Christopher to lead the session and share screen.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam, and welcome to this umpteenth webinar session. Today we are focusing on crowdfunding. I hope everyone can see the screen. Is the screen
sorry, Doctor, we are not able
to see it. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Let me just click again. It's okay. Yes, I think this is better.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So today we are focusing on a very important topic. All the topics on this platform are equally important, but this is especially important because of the global economic and financial policy changes that are taking place at breakneck speed. You know, it's more than 100-meter dash that is taking place on a daily basis. And people like ourselves are finding it very challenging to deal with issues to do with funding. And since funding is an important ingredient in the operations and strategic development of non-governmental organizations, as well as charities and other commercial institutions, it is an area that we must spend time thinking about it, reflecting on it, but also studying it, because if we become impatient and intolerant, we will miss the boat. So today I would like to present for the very first time, not just about crowdfunding for NGOs resilience, but also using crowdfunding to talk about other issues regarding funding and how we can navigate this important resource for our organizations and even for our lives. So we will be focusing on what is crowdfunding as a definition. We'll be looking at major regional crowdfunding platforms. That's those in Africa, Caribbean and Latin American region, East Asia, South Asia, North America, Europe, etc. We'll be focusing on the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, that was started in 1961 and of course is coming to an end if it hasn't already. We'll be looking at USAID management program funding across the globe. Then we'll be looking at alternatives, because when you have a problem, you need to find a solution or a set of solutions to such a problem. We'll be looking also at samples of private foundations. These are organizations that support non-governmental organizations on a yearly basis. Then we'll be looking at alternative donor agency funders, trends in supporting NGOs, that is what funders expect from NGOs, and then finally, what are the alternatives NGOs have to deal with the gap that USAID funding leaves. And so let us look at what is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding actually began 10, 15 years ago. In fact, crowdfunding always existed, but it was in different phraseologies or different words. But all it simply means it's a number of funders coming together online to present opportunities for people to market their products and services, to advertise them, to explain in clear, simple language what is it they're doing for service users, for clients, for customers, and so on. And so all it means is that you have online organizations and agencies that have funding. Sometimes you have local authorities also organizing funding, crowdfunding for various organizations. But these are just some of the examples of crowdfunding. And it says there it's a method or an approach to raise money or to raise funds for people who use online platforms, whether it's young people, elders, professionals, or business people, or NGOs like ourselves. So there are so many different types of crowdfunding mechanisms, but I've identified 3 of them because they are very important to us on this particular platform. So you have the reward funding. This is where funding looks for whether you have a market demand for a product, and of course, whether you can compete. And so reward is really based on your work that you do. It is rewarded on the basis of how much funding capacity you have. So, for example, if you have a business plan, if you have a strategy, what kind of funding do you require? And that is again based on reward. Reward, of course, is based on what you can deliver. And then you have, of course, donation-based crowdfunding. This is where people donate, individuals donate 10 rupees, 20 Kenyan shillings, 30 pounds, 50 US dollars, as the case might be, 11 shekel, which is Israeli funds. And so people donate small amounts to different causes. It's a very flexible approach. In fact, some people prefer that because as individuals give, they are also acknowledged on the site. When you, of course, give funding from an organizational point of view, you also have advertisements and promotions as well. And then you have peer-to-peer lending. This is where people from different organizations, for example, people who are part of a cooperative movement will come together, mobilize. Also, organizations that are involved in lending to smaller organizations. So the borrowing requirement is small, but the interest is also small as well, or the low interest rates, as it says here. And this enables NGOs to diversify or to expand their reach. But like every funding regime, or like every funder, there are opportunities as well as costs. And you can see them on the screen there in terms of pros and cons, what is good and what is bad. But again, these are just basically the three types of crowdfunding that are available. And as I said again, it's all about making sure that you profile the services that you have in a way that is intelligible, using photographs and infographics and so forth. And I'm sure that you guys will be asking questions about crowdfunding and how you present your services to the public when we have a Q&A. As I said in my opening gambit, there are major regional crowdfunding platforms, and you will see some of them. There are so many of them. There are hundreds of platforms. Some are bogus. In other words, some of them are not necessarily true. I wouldn't use the word fake, because the word fake is relative, because what is proper for someone may be a fake to others, but some of them are bogus in the sense that they do not reflect what they say, they do not do what they say, and they're very unprofessional as well as unethical in the way they deal with NGOs. So you've got to know these crowdfunders. You have to speak to people who run them. Don't just talk to them online, but try and meet them face to face, or even have an online discussion where you can see them up front, so to speak. But these are some of the crowdfunding platforms in the different parts of the world, and they certainly provide support for different causes. As you would notice on the right-hand side of your screen, most of them, of course, deal with social projects, creative projects. They look at projects that are driven by the community for the most part. Some deal with medical treatments in the case of India and South Asia. South Asia meaning Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, and other parts of the South Asian peninsula. And in terms of East Asia, we're referring here to Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and other parts of the East Asian peninsula. So this is where the action is in terms of crowdfunding platforms. And I would suggest that you visit the link that I have under the table so that you can see more on some of these crowdfunding platforms and what they actually do. Whenever we are talking about crowdfunding or any funding regime for that matter, it's important to understand the portfolio of these funders in relation to their estimated market value and the areas of focus or foci. Because quite frankly, when we are looking for funding, most times we are interested in how much funding is available in terms of volume or quantity. We don't even look at the value of the funders and what is it they actually do. And so this slide provides a snapshot of the enormous market value of the crowdfunding market and how important it is, and the areas in which it is focused: education, technology, heritage issues, cultural preservation, agriculture, and of course, social entrepreneurship, and many more areas that you can identify. And you can notice there that Africa has the lowest crowdfunding market, which means that crowdfunding in Africa is evolving. And that is something that is interesting to look at. The second lowest there would be the rest of the world, and that would be small places like Malaysia and some of the Pacific group of countries in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Islands. But these are just market values that we need to look at and again use them when we are doing crowdfunding. We can mention them on our platforms because we can actually identify what they actually do for our respective organizations. And now we come to the big papa or the big mama. This is a conversation that started just over 2 months ago in the United States, where there has been a pause in USAID funding. In some instances, it's been a diminution or lessening or getting rid of USAID funding, all parts of the world. When one looks at this particular funding regime, you can trace it back to, the middle part of the 20th century. I was about 3 or 4 years old when the when the USAID fund started, but I could remember writing about it, and one of my predictions was that at some point, people in the developing world will have to focus on alternative funding regimes rather than relying on this type of funding, which has funded almost every developmental issue or sector under the sun, be it agriculture, technology, disaster preparedness, civil society, conflict recovery, etc., education. But a lot of the funding for USAID in recent terms has been put into climate resilience. That is helping countries to deal with natural disasters, both human as well as natural. But this is the information that we were able to obtain. And you would notice that between 1991 and 2021, a lot of money was given or granted by the USAID, and this probably was due to COVID, among other things. And then, of course, it increased from 1971, 1981 to 120 billion. We can see that there. And again, a lot of it was due to the pandemic situation. At that time, people were using Zoom and Google Teams. In fact, it was the introduction of digital technology, allowing people to relate to each other in terms of social connectivity. But again, this is just a spectrum of the USAID funding, and it is something that you need to factor in again on your radar. And so what are the alternatives? And so, yes, we continue here on what is called a profile. This is a table of funding profiles regarding the USAID, and you would notice that on the left-hand side, 43.4 billion pounds of funding that was obligated. Obligated simply means what was agreed by countries and the United States itself. And so you had about 16.8 billion pounds given to governance. This is about civil society. This is about governments putting systems in place for elections, democracy, and so on, building democratic institutions, or what we call civil institutions. And then you had humanitarian. This is about disasters. You have health, of course, administrative. No one knows what administrative is. Sometimes this is to help governments to administer programs. And then you have agriculture. Infrastructure would be the building of roads, farm to market roads as well. Economic growth, this could be stimulating enterprise within the respective countries. And if you look at the bottom on your left, you would notice the regions that benefited from USAID. Again, a substantial amount of money was allocated or obligated to countries across the world. So very interesting indeed. And if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you would see the largest amount of USAID funding in recent times. This is 2024's estimates that Ukraine, because of the war in that particular part of the world, was granted 16.6 billion pounds. And this is for stability, et cetera, et cetera. You would notice also that a number of African countries featured last year and the year before in terms of USAID funding, namely Ethiopia, Somalia, the DRC, Nigeria, and South Sudan. And as you know, Sudan is now divided into two parts. You have North Sudan and South Sudan. So these are very interesting statistics, if not data, that you need to factor in when you're talking about your own funding organization and the programs that you have in mind. And so what are the alternatives to USAID funding? Whenever you are planning a program or an activity, you always have to take into consideration implications, challenges. What if this doesn't happen? What if you're planning for the next 3 years and you don't get funding? What do you do? How do you deal with alternative funding situations? Do you sit down and worry about it? Or do you fold your tent? Do you get rid of your organization, or do you try and look for opportunities that are out there for different types of funding? And so you have private foundations. These are foundations like the Bill Gates Foundation. Some people might say it's very difficult to access funding from them. You have the Red Cross. You have other foundations across India and different parts of the world that could provide funding for different projects that you have. Again, most of these foundations are looking for NGOs that have sustainable systems in place that could be accountable. In other words, your accounts are in order, you have a business plan in order, you have a quality control, a set of handbooks in place, and so on. In terms of crowdfunding, GoFundMe and Kickstarter, they tend to look at organizations that have a very dynamic or vibrant volunteer program. One of the webinars I want to look at some point is how you recruit and retain volunteers, because that's a big problem with a lot of NGOs. They have lots of people out there who are willing to volunteer their services, but those people are not being engaged. And so crowdfunding is a very good way to actually access funding for volunteer activities. And then, of course, you have the big organizations, your corporates, your banks, your commercial institutions that would give sponsorship for different activities. But again, those activities have to be measured, they have to be monitored, they have to be assessed and evaluated. And that is something that we need to look at as well. Then you have government grants. And it says they're exclusive or other than USAID. This is where governments around the world, they always are providing grants for different organizations. In the UK, for example, almost every local authority, and there are 400 of them in England and Wales alone, each of the local authorities provides small grants, medium-sized grants, to different organizations. And in other parts of the world, the same applies. It is for you to know where the funding is and how to access it, and then what are the priorities for such funding. And then you have your social impact investors. These are investors that look at the social effect or the social value that your activities will bring to bear on service users. So, for example, if you're doing something around community education, if you are organizing young people into sports and health activities in order for them to improve their lifestyles and their well-being, those are social impacts in themselves. If you're helping elders to become more digitally inclusive, digitally engaged, or socially connected using digital technology, that is also another social impact. And then, of course, you have your altruistic or private individual who is willing to donate or give his or her savings or wealth to organizations that are interested in providing funding. There are people, for example, who give money for different causes, not just for conflict and wars, but they also give money for a variety of purposes and reasons. And they can be found on the World Wide Web. They could be found in your countries and regions and districts. And then, of course, you have your international NGOs. These are large organizations like the Red Cross, Children in Need, Oxfam Society. All of these are international charities that provide funding to smaller organizations. And sometimes you can get funding through working with these organizations rather than getting direct funding. There are different ways in which you can be resourced without just getting funding. Sometimes you need to subcontract with other organizations so that they can develop trust and confidence in your ability to deliver. Because funding is all about deliverability. It's not just about accessing the money and spending it. We were talking about the role of private foundations and their support to NGOs. Now, these are just some of them. There's so many of them, as I mentioned, hundreds and hundreds of them operating in different parts of the world, including Africa, India, and South Asia, and Europe. But these are just the major kingpins or queen pins, if you like, that are very much operational in different parts of the countries. And so they focus, if you notice, most of them focus on education, others focus on economic development, others focus on human rights or civil rights or entitlements, others focus on youth development and poverty alleviation. So this is very significant. So if you have material impoverishment or material poverty in your country or village or district, if you have young people who are unemployed and they want to be trained in a variety of labor market skills, if you have elders who are struggling to network and to be involved in different areas, if they're struggling with their health and well-being, those are some of the projects that these private foundations will be interested in supporting. And so I think it is important that, again, you try to do research on organizations like the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. Tata Trust has been around for a long time. Infosys Foundation has been around as well for a little while. And then you have other charitable trusts in Europe. The Prince of Wales, of course, does a lot of work at the moment. He's now the king, but he has a charity that helps a lot of young people And that charity has been doing that for the last 40 to 50 years. And so we have a sort of split screen here. We have, this is alternative donor agency funders. And what we've done here is divided funding, into different formats. So we have core funding, which is different to grant funding and project funding. So core funding is when funders agree in principle to fund your operations. So they might fund your operations for between 1 to 3 years, and that is for sustainability purposes. And then you have institutional grants that will give funding for that purpose as well. So they're looking at organizations that are developing capacity. So for example, you might be interested in hiring a core of volunteers for the next 3 or 4 years. You might be interested in enlisting an administrator to help you with the paperwork and the digital technology stuff. You might be thinking about having a digital officer to help to manage your digital technological programs. In terms of capacity building, again, you might be looking at a series of training programs to help people to develop their skills, both within the organization and without. And then you have grant funding. Grant funding really is funding that is given to different types of projects. These are projects that could be based on heritage, they could be enterprise, well-being, sports and leisure, arts, or the creative industries area, the environment, transport and logistics, manufacturing, agriculture. All of these are very much driven by grant funding. And under that, of course, you have research grants. This is for research activities. This is looking for information or using information to actually inform and guide your projects. A lot of NGOs don't do research. They tend to look for information and cut and paste rather than looking at evidence-based information that you can use to include in your project. So there are funders out there that will help you with pieces of research. And then you have education grants like UNESCO and the World Bank. And what they do is provide funds for vocational, technical, and career education programs for young people and people who are unemployed. And as I mentioned, of course, there are environmental grants that are offered by large organizations, and they tend to look at the environment. So if you have a series of allotment farms donated for young people, and you want them to be trained in climate justice, among other things, that funding could also be given. And then, of course, you have project funding. Now, project funding is almost like core funding. The only difference with core funding is that it is given for a number of years. Project funding is limited to probably 6 months to a year or up to 2 years. And these are funded for infrastructure projects. So for example, if it's road building, uh, building industrial houses for logistics and storage, or even building houses, low-cost houses for individuals who are poor materially. And then, of course, you have your health projects, whether it's to deal with disease management or post-pandemic issues, et cetera, et cetera. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are just some of the alternative donor agency funders that are available. Some of you might think that they are very difficult to access, but if you don't try, you wouldn't know how to access these donors. This is a table that I decided to put together because one of the challenges that non-governmental organizations have, particularly existing and fledgling meaning that they are very new to the market, is that they don't understand what NGOs, what funders are looking for, whether they are private foundations, whether they are crowdfunding agencies, whether they're corporate sponsors, donors, or government agencies. And so what this table suggests is what funders are looking for and what is the potential for organizations such as yours to be funded. And if we just look at Africa, for example, the trends for funding NGOs vary. So vary means that sometimes they fund these organizations, sometimes they don't fund them, depending on the kind of project specification they have. In relation to crowdfunding, it's an emerging market in Africa, as I mentioned, because we did show the evidence how it is very limited there. Corporate sponsors, again, limited because, again, projects are not properly put together. Yes, people donate money. It's moderate. Government intervention, yes, significant. And in Britain, of course, it shows a difference between, or variations between moderate to high because of the developed nature of funding in the country. In the Caribbean region, which is in the Americas, foundations, limited funding, yes. Crowdfunding too is emerging there. Sponsorship, again, limited. Donors, moderate. Government, moderate, again, because those economies are small. East Asia, it's between moderate and high. Europe, well, very high as well. Latin America, North America. And in South Asia, again, there is a bit of limitation in terms of foundations. Crowdfunding, again, is something that is emerging there. Corporate sponsors, again, limited. Donors, moderate. Government, significant. So if you look at Africa and if you look at Africa, Europe, Britain, of course, is part of Europe, North America, and South Asia, you would see how significantly the government is involved in supporting NGOs because governments know that NGOs provide funding, provide services that are very essential, whether it's education, health, well-being, social development, youth development, welfare. So if you use this particular table as a guide, you will begin to understand where you can have access to funding from your governments and from other institutions. So please study these slides when you receive them, because I'm sure that you'll be able to make a lot of sense from them, and the information will be able to impact on your organization from time to time. And so finally, we come to an alternative strategy to the USAID funding regime. We spoke about the different types of funding that are available. We talked about private foundations. We talked about crowdfunding itself. We looked at individual donors, corporate sponsors, philanthropists or altruists. And we also spoke about funding offered or delivered by government, central government. Most times government provides funding to NGOs through different departments and sections within government and local government. And so if we are looking at an alternative to USAID funding, we need to develop a strategy to tap into that. And so the first strategy is trying to identify funding beyond USAID. And there's some useful examples in the center there, grants from the European Union, the UK, Canada, global affairs. And of course, the minimum threshold is 500,000. Some NGOs on this platform, or most of you may not qualify, but if you work with different organizations in your country, including charities, you may be able to access this kind of funding. And you notice there the threshold is 50 million. And then you have the multilateral development banks. These are regional banks that are, in East Asia, South Asia. You've got the African Development Bank, you've got the Caribbean Development Bank, you've got the banks in the UAE that are part of the Arab League. And there's so many other banking institutions that exist that develop what is called sovereign wealth fund. This is funds that they generate from the stock market, and that those funds are recycled, or they're put in a revolving fund so that they can help individuals from time to time. And these are funds that you need to look at. Don't be turned off, or don't be scared, or don't be fearful of the amount of money that they're asking you probably to have access to. But look for small grants and use those grants as a means of leveraging into the projects and programs you have. And talking about leveraging, look at the philanthropic capital that exists. Look at people who actually donate money for different causes, not just the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, but other foundations around the world. People who start by giving about 10,000 upwards. Start with the smaller amounts, and then you build on them. And then you have innovative finance. This is where people they're dealing with what is called green bonds. Lots of businesses are tapping into climate change, environmental resilience programs, and they're putting their money in this aspect. Crowdfunding, for example, if you want to develop an environmental program, let's say for young people, to build trees or to clear a landfilling site or what have you, anything to do with the environment, you can get funding for. But that project has to be sustainable if it is to attract funding from different organizations. So this is by and large what we should be looking at beyond USAID funding. These are some of the trends that we will find in USAID in terms of robot technology. I put this deliberately because funding will be very much prominent in this area. The question of AI, intelligence, robotic technology, all of these would have a very interesting impact in terms of what we do as NGOs. So we've come to an end, and let me thank you very much for this presentation. And at this time, I'd like to open the floor for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher, for your insightful presentation. Participants, we are now taking questions. Please send in your questions so that we can give answers to your questions. The first question is, do we have organizations that can donate tools in kind? For example, I would like to focus on getting tools, saying for mining in most engineering programs. I work with International University of East Africa, support a skilling center in rural school called Action High School.
Yes, I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, that is in Uganda, isn't it? East Africa. Yeah,
Yes.
yes. There are lots of there are lots of mining companies that do provide donate tools. But again, as I said again, if as an organization you are not visible, if you are not marketing your services or your products or projects, if you are not doing much to be out there, let people see what you're doing. If you don't talk about what you're doing, for example, having podcasts, having sessions where you allow yourself to be invited, for example, etc. If there is a mining conference, or if there's a conference on industrial engineering, for example, or metallurgy, go and invite yourself and go to these places. But there are lots of organizations that are willing to donate tools for industrial development, particularly around mining and agriculture. So that is what I would suggest the NGO in question should do. I hope,
Thank you for your.
thank you.
The next question is, can NGO that is yet to register access these funding?
Yes, I've answered this question repeatedly on this platform. NGOs, if you're a new NGO, you can register. Sorry, if you're a new NGO, you can access funding. Some NGOs, even if they're not incorporated, if they have a constitution or governance document, they can apply for funding, even though the funding might be very small or minute. But I would always I always say that make sure that you're registered as a CBO or a limited company by guarantee without share capital so that you can have access to funding. I think,
Thank you for your input. Yeah. The next question is it possible to crowd fund for local organizations in Uganda? And which platforms can be of any importance?
well, I don't know about the crowdfunding in different countries. I think it will be very uncharitable if I try to hazard a guess. But what I would say is that the NGO in question needs to conduct a research. Just type up crowdfunding in Uganda or crowdfunding in Africa in Google, and you'll be able to find a lot of information there. I'm not an expert in crowdfunding. I'm a humble business consultant who does a lot of bid writing and fundraising, so I'm familiar with funders. But in terms of specific crowdfunding agencies, I would suggest that the NGO person do his or her research to find that information. And then, of course, you can compare and contrast other crowdfunding agencies like GoFund, GoWeFund, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. for your input. The next question is it possible to appeal for funding by tapping from multilateral cooperation by not actually applying for grants from their platform? If so, what is the best practice to go about it?
Well, there's no best practice or wrong practice. I think what you need to do, first of all, is to identify what is it you're looking for in terms of funding, not just funding for funding's sake. So if you have a particular project in mind around agriculture, around heritage, around youth, around well-being for elders, it could be a skills development program for the unemployed or early school leavers or people who are at risk of getting themselves involved with the law. You can look for funders that actually provide funding for those projects and then see how you can tailor your project idea to suit those funders. That is what you do. And once you do that, you then you engage with them, you send them an email to find out, could they fund this program? And then you say you'd like to have a meeting with them, probably online or face to face. But by all means, write to them. Don't just write to them, say, I need funding for so, so, so. Discuss the idea with them first, because you need to assess whether or not that idea is feasible or not, or whether that idea is fundable. So I think that's the best way to do. The other thing to do is to attend funding fairs, attend meetings where funders meet. When government officials meet in a particular district or region or village, make sure you attend those meetings. You may not like the minister. He or she may not be part of your tribe or your caste, but it doesn't matter. Meet him or her and talk to him, because those are some of the inhibitions that NGOs have. Speak to the officials because they are the ones in power. And I think that is the way you will be able to make headway with funding. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Dr. Christopher. The next question is, how can we access AI tools to practically approach crowdfunding opportunities to leverage fundraising and connections with donors?
Yeah, somebody has read my script, actually. This is something I think in June we'll be looking at artificial intelligence tools for crowdfunding opportunities. But what I will say in response to the question is that AI tools are based on information that is already on websites. And what the AI tools actually do is to bring together all of this information. And what you need to do is to use Google search or even Yahoo search engine to access information on crowdfunding opportunities. And what I would suggest you guys do is to type in crowdfunding opportunities wherever you are. If it's in India, you write crowdfunding opportunities in India, crowdfunding opportunities in Africa, crowdfunding opportunities in America, whichever geographical area you live or your business or your enterprise is located, you typing that and you'll be able to access as much information as possible uh, from that particular aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is, what are the biggest risks NGOs face when relying on crowdfunding during emergencies or economic downturns?
The biggest risk lies in not knowing. I think that is a risk factor in itself. It's not just a risk, but it's a challenge. What is it are you looking for? I always ask, when people come to me, I need 20,000, I need 30,000. The question I ask, what do you need the money for? Oh, I have this project in my head. I said, okay, have you written it down? No. I said, okay, let me help you to conceptualize the project. Okay, this is what you need it for. How many people you intend to deliver this project to? I don't know. I didn't think about that. So these are some of the challenges that NGOs have. They have wonderful ideas, but they don't know how to go about putting a project specification together. The title of the project, the aims, the objectives, the delivery methods, the outcomes, the outputs, the quality control mechanisms, the evaluation strategy, sustainability strategy, all of those are very important aspects of your project. So before you even think about crowdfunding, think about your project. What is it you have in mind? And once you think it through carefully, then you think about crowdfunding. So always make sure that you put the horse before the cart rather than the cart before the horse, so to speak. I hope I've answered that fairly okay.
Yes, Doctor. The next question is, can crowdfunding help NGOs reduce dependency on traditional donors and build long-term sustainability?
Yes and no, because if you over rely on crowdfunding and you don't get much of it, you can be disappointed. So I would say combine crowdfunding with other forms of funding. In fact, what crowdfunding actually does, apart from helping an NGO to access individual donations, it also helps organizations to have access to other funders because you are visible. So that's what crowdfunding does. It offers visibility, because once you're on the platform and people are looking to donate to different organizations, they will come across yours at some point. So I would say combine the best of the best. Don't just look for crowdfunding and donations only, but look at sponsorship, look at grant funding. And some organizations tend to feel that, or tend to agree that if you have a crowdfunding site, they see you as legit. They see you as someone who they can trust because you're visible. So don't depend on crowdfunding only or any other funding, but depend on what I would say a variety of funding. Explore them. That's the kind of advice I would like to give to you guys.
Thank you, Dr. for your input. The
Um,
next question is, in what ways does crowdfunding build both financial and community resilience for NGOs?
crowdfunding can Crowdfunding has the potential for financial sustainability. It depends on the amount you need, and it depends on the duration that you are looking for this funding, because crowdfunding should be an ongoing campaign, in my view. It should not just be limited to, okay, I need 50 grand or 50K to do X, Y, Z, and once you get the money, that's it. It should be an ongoing campaign. The other aspect to that, of course, is if you want to build capacity, you also have to look at the social capital that you have in your organization. And that is how many people are untrained in a particular profession, how many people need to be reskilled in a particular area, and do you have sufficient manpower or woman power in the organization to help you to deliver those programs? So it is a chicken and egg situation, funding on the one hand, but also human capital on the other hand. And to have that balance is always a difficult proposition. And that is why I say to NGOs time and time and again to look at your human resources first before you look at funding. Sometimes we are so obsessed or taken in by, okay, there's money out there. What about the human resources? Could you spend the money? Could you deliver the project on specification? And if you can deliver on it, well, then you need to look at the kind of funding that you can manage in terms of delivering. So again, do your homework, do your what is called the fundamentals, try to find out what these projects you're talking about. Make sure you're very clear, run it by consultants, run it by experts, and don't think that people are going to steal your ideas, because they may take some of the ideas, but they can't steal it, overall, because it's your idea. So share your ideas with experts, and try and encourage them to support you wherever you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. Participants, due to time limitations, we cannot cover all the questions posted here. As now we have reached the end of the webinar, I want to thank each one of you for your active participation. And on behalf of Funds for NGOs, I would like to thank Dr. Christopher for his invaluable insights. Participants, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form for today's session. Your input is crucial in helping us to improve. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to contact us at support@fundsforngos.org. The feedback form will appear on your screen in a moment. Once again, thank you all, Dr. Christopher, and to all the participants. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.